Grandma and Grandpa Stratton, 1979, the first part of July. The Dana family will start off with the presentation. First, this is going to be a tribute to our grandparents, our mother and father. Margot, can you tell us what is it that you can remember that Grandma has done that's very special that you want to remember her about?
She
took care of you.
Just don't do that.
Okay, she took good care of all of these kids while Kimball and Benjamin were born. And what about Grandpa? What did he do?
There's a room upstairs.
That's right. He really helped to make a room upstairs for them to sleep and play in. And Carrie, what was it that Grandpa did that you remember?
When I was last, Grandpa was the first one to come try to look for me.
That's right. She was scared last reunion and got lost, and Grandpa was the first one to come out looking for her, and she remembered that. And what about Grandma? What were you going to remember about Grandma?
She watched me to school the first day. And she made my crib when I was born.
Right, she painted her bed for her before she came home from the hospital the first day of her life. Grandma was in painting her crib, getting it ready. And Kimball?
Grandma. I love Grandma.
That's right. Your Grandma and Grandpa love you. That's what you remember most. Okay, you can sit down now. Okay. Cheryl, would you like to make a few comments?
Well, I just want to thank, and I know that Cliff and Pat love us. That took a lot of hard work up there in that room, and Grandpa did most of it. He was the expert, and I know that he loved us enough to let us use his cars, even though we had some mechanical problems with them that he wasn't counting on.
I want to let them know too how much we all appreciate the efforts that you two went through for this reunion. As we look around and see all of the drawers that were cleaned out so that we would all have 3 or 4 drawers apiece to use for our children's things, and when we see just all the furniture and the beds and all the things that you two did to prepare for this reunion, we appreciate it because it's made it more comfortable for us and easier for us to take care of our families, and we love you for that. As children, there have been several things many things that we can remember of sacrifices that you made in our behalf. And since, Daddy, this is nearing your retirement time, we want to especially acknowledge the many hours of work that you put in our behalf to help pay for our colleges and everything that we've had in our lives. We have you to thank for, and we appreciate that. As parents now, we can even more appreciate what you two did for us. The hours that you were up at night when we were tiny, and and when we were older, the hours that you were up at night waiting for us to come home. And there's just so many things, we can't even begin to number them all. But we want you to know that we appreciate those things, and we love you very much for the many hours of sacrifice and love that you've given to us. The children are all going to sing you a song now. Okay, everyone stand. Ready? Face that, face.
I love Grandma, he loves me. I love Grandma, yes sirree. They love us, and so you see, we are a happy family.
Very good. Thank you. Sit down now. Very good. Now, Carol Ann is going to let you know of a sacrifice that we're going to make for you in the next couple of years. And believe me, when you see what it is, you'll see what a sacrifice it's going to be, knowing our past records. Now, okay, ready, set, go.
Mom and Dad, we're thrilled with your recent mission call. We wish you the very best of health and strength and peace and joy. In this service, may you be blessed. We support you 100%, you know. And to show you we really do, we're making a special promise as our anniversary gift to you. Our gift is a pledge of letters, though it's not our usual trend. Our envelopes of love and news to you each week we'll send. One of us will take a week of each month while you're away to send along our greetings and to brighten up your day. Cliff's message will come first each month, his thoughts with you to share, next a line from Margaret to show you of her care. Carol will take the third week, her feelings to express. During the final week, you'll get a note from Chuck's address. It's just our way of saying you mean so very much. And while you're on your mission, we'll try to keep in touch. And while you're here to witness it, everyone will sign this, and I've got a frame.
Mommy, can I be first?
No, just
You're first.
No, you're the first week, my dear.
You're the first week. Can I?
Hey, just a minute here, just a minute. Kimball.
Then I'll put it in the
Stay here,
frame
son.
for you.
Kimball.
And then there's a copy for all of us here too.
Tomorrow, all the kids, I'm going to let them make these thumbprint stationery. There's plenty for all of you to
Let
make
me
sure you
see.
want.
Let me see.
These little thumbprints.
Let me see.
What is it?
See, you're gonna put your thumb in a stamp pad and then put a thumbprint down, and you put little people on these, and these will be some of the paper we'll send letters to Grandma and Grandpa on their missions, okay? So you kids can make these tomorrow so that we can have our stationery ready for Grandma and Grandpa. So these are just some ideas we can do. Thank you, Carol Ann, very much. Now the children again are going to sing another song. I hope they call me on a mission. Can you? Just everyone, because
All of you.
because you've all been practicing
You
it.
sing some of it.
Okay, we're all ready again. Okay, Marlene, where's Marlene? Okay, Marlene's going to stand up in front and lead everybody, because she's our leader for this one. Ready, set, go.
I hope they call me on a mission when I have gone a foot or two.
Look over here, brother.
I know the will be ready to teach and preach and work as missionaries too. I hope that I can share the gospel with those who want to know the truth. I want to be a missionary to serve. I love the Lord.
Thank you, children, very much.
We're
That's
starting
so
one
special.
He's putting in my phone.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Now, Chuck has a little presentation that he would like to make for us, for himself. Turn it off.
No.
Yeah, turn it off, Roz.
Something that I started to do on my mission that I never finished that I wish I would have, and that's take about 10 minutes every night and write down the most important experience of that day, whether it be just something little or something very traumatic or something very super spiritual. And so, as a family, we'd like to present to you my personal journal books.
Okay, hold those up, and Chuck, turn around. Get on there behind Caroline.
Names are on them.
Yes, he even got them engraved for you.
Yeah, Chuck got them engraved for you and everything.
Okay, Chuck. Look like you're giving them one, like you're giving Dad one. Smile! Pretend like you like it, Dad.
I do like it.
Okay, you've got to promise that every night before you go to bed, take 5 minutes. Doesn't have to be a long letter, just 5 minutes, and write one choice experience of that day. Okay?
Or the next morning,
That's
whichever.
a super gift.
Okay? Commitment? Dad?
Oh, we'll have to do it, I guess.
Mom?
Mom?
You got 3 witnesses.
Okay. If we could write 2 letters. Write those 5 minutes down. Okay. Now, Cliff has spent quite a bit of time putting together something that we feel that you will enjoy. Cliff, we'd like you to do your... Yes.
This is from everybody. From everybody in your family. What we did was we took a trip to Nauvoo, as you remember, and we found out where all of your ancestors lived and where all of Gerald's ancestors lived, since he sealed to you, and where all of Marcia's ancestors lived because she sealed to you, and where Bob's ancestors lived, and we marked them out on a map in different colors. The reds are where all of Dad's ancestors came from, were all the red ones. And then the blue is where the Danas and the Phelps came from, and the green is where Marcia's ancestors came from, and all these color codes go with the pictures and the people, and there's a little bit about each family that lived at Nauvoo. And what we've done is, in addition to this is for you to hang up on your wall. Hold it up just a minute, Joe. And then I made another copy of it and made a Xerox of it, and these will fold up in your books of remembrance, and each of your children get a copy of this to go in their books of remembrance. And it shows the people who lived at each place. It shows exactly where they lived. And it shows, although these were color photographs to begin with, they didn't Xerox out very well, it shows a little bit about the place, where they lived. So anyone now, and any of our families, any of your grandchildren or great-grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren, can go back to Nauvoo and in just an hour or so can go to every one of the home sites of those people that are sealed to us as a family through you two for time and all eternity. And so each of the kids get one of these. And what I've done is I've taken this and I've taken pictures of this, and we're going to go over each of these now on slides to share with you a little bit about each family.
John, thank you. Bring that right up here where we can look at it.
This is one for you. This is three of the type maps. I just want to get you oriented. Again, these are all color coded on moms and dads, and each one of these numbers goes with the place, okay, with the site. And so let me just share with you just a couple that you might be interested in. This is Dana property here and out here, in the Nauvoo house where
the temple is there, Cliff.
Okay, the temple is right here, Temple Square. And on your maps, all of these streets came out. All of these street names came out, and you could drive right to them that way, with some luck, because not all the streets have signs on them. But anyway, the Strattons we'll talk about. That's the Cottam down there. This is the Stratton we'll talk about here, there and there. We'll talk about the Romneys and the Lees up in here, and we'll talk about the Danas, as I already mentioned. So we'll talk about each of those. As you can see, there was 5 wards at Nauvoo at the time of the Exodus. And so you can see that this was only, about 2 or 2.5 miles across this peninsula. It's not a very long peninsula. And so this made this place, just before they left, they said that they had 5,000 adults that could receive their temple endowment. And so that means there were about 2,500 families, okay, here at Nauvoo. So you can see it's kind of a small place. And so most of these people knew each other, and certainly they were in the same wards as each other. Okay? All right, let's talk a little bit about some of these people. And again, I can't tell you but 1/100th of all that we know about these people because of our research. I'm just going to tell you just 2 or 3 highlights of different things. Okay, Uncle Chuck. Okay, this is the place where the abbots and the bunkers were. This is Marcia's side. I have them in alphabetical order, except for 1 or 2 places. All right. So we're just going to go through alphabetical order. Okay, go ahead, Chuck. These are the people that live there, and this is Stephen Abbott's wife, Abigail Smith, and he died at Nauvoo. He was a bugler in the Nauvoo Legion. You know what the Nauvoo Legion was, you kids? That's where they had all those armies. Well, he was a bugler, and he received his patriarchal blessing from Father Smith, Joseph Smith's father, the first patriarch of the church. And as you read his patriarchal blessing, it's fantastic. It's just like ours today. They start out the same way, they say the same kinds of things, and they close the same way. And yet he received his blessings from the first patriarch of the church, Joseph Smith's father. Okay, what happened was then, this is Edward Bunker, you know Bunkerville in Nevada, and that's from one of the places that we went. Edward Bunker, and that's not a mole, that's where the picture used to be. All right, for those of you that can know this on all the screens. Let me tell you about Edward Bunker. Now, Edward Bunker courted Emily Abbott over there on the right. He courted Emily Abbott at the last place that you just saw, because that's where she was living with her parents. Okay, they fell in love, and they got married in the Nauvoo temple, and then they were, of course, driven out of Nauvoo. Well, what happens then is he joins the Mormon battalion. So he leaves his wife after about 3 or 4 weeks. He leaves his wife at winter quarters, and he makes the entire march of the Mormon battalion all over to California. Then he goes back from California to Salt Lake, and then from Salt Lake to winter quarters to get his wife. He finds out that he has a son. He's now a couple years old. Excuse me. And then before he can take his wife across the plains, he gets called on a mission. So he goes to England on a mission for 3 years, while his wife, Emily Abbott, takes her son and goes across the plains with her widow mother, and they go to Salt Lake, and then when he gets back from his mission, he brings a bunch of Welsh and Scottish people with him, and because he had been across the plains, going backwards, they decided to make him captain of a handcart company. So he then pushed a handcart all the way back across the plains, back to Salt Lake City. He was called down to Bunker and made bishop down in Bunkerville, and of course they tried the United Order down in Bunkerville. So that's Bishop Bunker, and that's Emily Abbott. And our patriarch Abbott in our stake is related to these same families. Okay, quick, we got a lot to do. Okay, yep, backwards. Okay, forget that, let's go again. I'm not going to take time to show you maps. Okay, now we talk about the Benjamin Freeman Bird home, and this home is still standing. This is the way it was before the church decided to restore it.
Daddy, that's your side of the family.
This is Dad's side, okay? And this is the log cabin, okay? And this is the house, and then there was a gunsmith shop out here. Then they had a blacksmith shop and some other shops out back here. And a baby's grave is right there. Okay, now let's have the next one. Let's show you what it looks like now. This is the way that they restored it. And this is the log cabin that they first built. Benjamin Freeman Bird heard the gospel. He was one of the early converts in the 1830s. And he went through the Far West War, the Kirtland period. He was driven out, through all of Missouri and Illinois and Ohio and all of those persecutions, and ended up here at Nauvoo. And he began to build this home. And we're not certain whether he finished the home or not before he sold it to Browning in 1844. The persecution became too great. And he was now in his 70s, and he was just an old man. And so he traded this piece of property on Main Street. Joseph Smith's home is just a couple blocks down from this. He traded this piece of property then. Go ahead to the next one. I don't know if that shows it or not. For this piece of property at La Crosse. And they were a very wealthy family. And this is just outside of Nauvoo, about, 15 miles or so. And he had a large 50-acre farm out there, and he was just getting settled on it when they drove him out, and he went across the plains with his family, and then he landed in Springville.
At 70 years old?
about 60 or 70 years old, and he landed in Springville, and there he died in Springville, a very happy and content man. Oh, I need to tell you, he was present. I don't have his picture because he's the oldest generation that we have. But he was present when Sidney Rigdon got up after the martyrdom and claimed to be the next president of the church. And then Brigham Young got up and he said, well, you choose who you want, but Joseph said that nothing can separate him and the 12. And while he was saying that, he was transfigured. There's about 8 of our families that were present, and he was one of them. And he was there, and he saw Brigham transfigured as Joseph, and therefore he was willing to pay the price to cross the flames.
Was it he or his son that was the bodyguard to the
That's
prophet?
next, right now.
Oh.
Let's go to the next one. Okay, this is also Dad's. This is where Charles Bird, Benjamin Freeman Bird's son, this is where Charles Bird had his home. Okay, it was right in here on this plot. This is Main Street right over here, by the way. The main Mulholland Street as it comes in. Okay, let's go again. Then he had this as a piece of farming plot. Right there is that piece of property that you just saw. It was right over there. And this now you see was his plot. They really had a tough time. As you look at the soil here, and then think about the soil that they had in Dixie, you can imagine the difference. Okay, go.
Boy, that's good soil, right?
Fantastic. And then he moved out. They had about a 33-acre farm out on the outside of town here, and on the outside of town here is where he lived, and he was one of the bodyguards for the prophet Joseph Smith. And I have his history. I found his history since I sent you all, about him. Let me share with you some things that you don't know. He was on duty the day that Joseph was taken to Carthage, and then his day came up again the day before the martyrdom, and he traded with one of the personal bodyguards. And the way that they used to tell each other was these two men would trade, and while Joseph was at Carthage, he came home to get some blankets and supplies for Joseph and John Taylor and the brother and the Hiram Smith that were in Carthage. And the other man went to watch Joseph and the brother. And the way that they would signal was whenever it was the other guy's turn, the other guy would get up on one of these little mounds, little hills. They call those hills. You get up on one of those hills and you wave his hat. And that would tell Charles it was his turn then to go and watch the prophet. Well, at Carthage, instead of waving his hat, the man came up on one of these hills and he knelt down by his horse. And so Charles then knew that Joseph and Hiram had been killed, or that Joseph had been martyred. Now, Charles, let's go to the next picture. Let's show you Charles. Charles, this is Charles. Charles and his family had joined the church before the Kirtland era. And so they were very close to Joseph and Emma. So close, in fact, that after they brought the bodies back to Nauvoo, Emma was concerned that some of the mobs would try to steal their bodies because there was a $1,000 reward for each of the 2 bodies. In those days, $1,000 was like $1 million now, okay, or a lot of money now. And so she asked Charles to use his wagon, and she and Charles and Hiram's wife and other members of the close family took the bodies and buried them underneath the Nauvoo house. And then later he was asked to secretly help Emma bury them next to the homestead. And so that's how close he was to the prophet Joseph Smith and Emma, his wife. And I could go on forever. We're not sure this is her picture, Mary Ann Kennedy, his wife, but we think it is. One old person thinks that this is it, so I put it in here. And this is the lady that bore children at Kirtland, at Far West, during the Far West War. She bore children at Nauvoo, and then she bore children at Winter Quarters while crossing the plains, and then she bore them in Salt Lake.
She even went clear back. She bore them in New York.
Yeah,
I mean,
before she
every
came.
place the saints were, that's where she bore child.
She-
You look at
she
her
bore
family
children.
group sheet, and
My
it's just
face is like
But I just heard the other day that my mother had mentioned to me that
Mother, my face is like
one of her relatives, which is the Butler line, was also a bodyguard. So chances are
You bet they were.
the two of them knew one another very well.
Oh, you bet. In fact, you bet. In fact, on this map, you'd be surprised. There was only one main store, Joseph Smith's store. and they all, they all purchased there. There was only one temple they were all working on. Most all these people knew each other. Well, this is Charles Bird and Mary Ann Kennedy, and by the way, he was an ordained temple worker in the Nauvoo Temple, and he helped push those 5,000 saints through to get their down before they crossed the plain. And he was one of the first 7 presidents of 70 ever called it in the church. Was this man right here, Charles Bird. Okay, I could go on and on forever, but we need to go. We got a lot of families.
We'll go the right way.
Okay, this is the cemetery, and there we have about 8 or 10 of our family that are buried in the cemetery that died at Nauvoo. Besides the Bugler Abbot we just talked about, there were many of our family that died at Nauvoo, and they're buried in that cemetery. We didn't have time to go see the cemetery, but we know that they're there. Okay, keep going. Tell you some more stories, keep these kids interested. Okay, now this is where a guy named James Polly Brown lived, was right in this area right here. This half of this property. His name, this is on Marsh's side. Okay, James Polly Brown. Okay, let's go. And this is their picture. And James Polly Brown, we had a Brown named Ebenezer Brown, and James Polly took his family, this is his wife, Eunice Reeser, and he took his family, and Ebenezer Brown took his wife, Phoebe. Okay? And so these were 2 of the families, the Brown families, that were one on one battalion together. When they got down to Pueblo, he had taken 3 wagons with him because he was somewhat wealthy. And so they asked him to take his wagons back up to join the saints with the sick. And so he met the saints as they were crossing the plains with the sick, and he settled at Manti. And this is Laura Ann Tater. She met her husband at Nauvoo, who was the Newman Brown, and she lost one of her parents at Nauvoo, which is buried in that cemetery. Okay, let's go again. Okay, let's keep going. I'm not going to show you any more maps. Okay, you get right on the outskirts of Nauvoo, and there's a beautiful little valley, and right down here in this valley there's a river. And right there on that piece of land right there is where the Cotton family lived, and that's on Marsh's side. Okay, now if you count them up, there's an equal number on the Stratton side and on the Romney side. All right, so you're going to get as many Strattons as many of your side as you do Marsh's. Okay, and then there's 2 or 3 Danish, and then there's a couple of Openshaws. All right. So just because we get a few Strattons together, a few Romneys together, don't get upset. All right. This is where the Cotton side lived. Let me tell you about the Cottons. Show me the picture. Thomas Cotton and his wife, Caroline Smith, both lost their spouses in the persecutions. One at Nauvoo and one before Nauvoo. They met when they were driven out of Nauvoo. Neither one had the resources to cross the plains, and so they went down to live in St. Louis to work in a large metropolitan area. When they did that, they went to the same church and they fell in love. Okay, well, they were determined to cross the plains, but they did not have any wherewithal to cross the plains, and so they crossed with another family, or at least they had just the bare necessities. And that meant that Caroline Smith had to walk the entire way across the plains. She walked every foot of the way, from Nauvoo all the way to Salt Lake City. Thomas Cotton, when Johnson's army threatened the saints in Salt Lake, remember Johnson's army was going to come in and wipe them out? He was a sergeant in Johnson's army, and when Wilford Woodruff was persecuted because of the polygamy trials, Wilford Woodruff lived with them for several long periods of time, up to 2 and 3 years. While he was president of the church, he lived in their home in Dixie. Most of these families settled in Dixie, by the way. I'd say all but 3 or 4 of them settled in Dixie. Okay? So that's the time that Wilford Woodruff lived with. Cool. Oh boy, he had a very... Okay, now we get to one of the Danas. This is C.R. Dana. Charles Root Dana. And Charles Root Dana had a home. This right now is some kind of an amphitheater. And he had a home somewhere right up in this area up in here. He owned this plot of land up on top of this mountain. And the Mississippi is right behind us. There's a beautiful, beautiful view of the Mississippi River. And he had his home right up there. Okay, go again.
That's where they hold the City of Joseph pageant every year.
Now,
the church puts that on.
And then right up on top of that hill, he had another piece of property, this one here, which he probably had a garden on. The temple, by the way, is only 1 block up here. See that street? one block further he had a temple. So he had a garden and a home about 2 blocks from the temple. And so this was a garden plot. And again, Uncle Chuck. And then this is where he had his farm. You can see the Mississippi River out there. He had it next to the Mississippi River, out on the Delta. Okay, let's go now. Okay, now let me tell you a little bit about them before we get going. I'm not that familiar with them. Just a minute. Charles Jourdain and Margaret Kennedy. Okay, they had a daughter, Amanda Angela Phelps. Margaret died in 1850 on the plains. The mother died in 1850 on the plains, 25 miles from the Missouri River. So she was buried while they were going across the plains. Okay, now we get to the Gardner side. Go back to this one. The Gardner side. Do you know who the Gardners were? Do you have anything else you want to tell us about the Danas?
Just that this Charles Root Dana is my great-great-great-grandfather. And he ended up eventually settling in Mesa, where George Carlos Dana, you had down Don Carlos, but it's George Carlos Dana was born. Excuse me, not born, but settled.
So they went down to Mesa.
Yeah.
And the other one went up to Idaho?
Yeah, they first went to Idaho, then down to Mesa.
Oh, I see.
And that's where my grandfather was born, and he was the first white baby boy born in Mesa.
Now, this is on Dad's side, back to Dad. George Bryant Gardner, this is the landing, or part of it. We didn't know whereabouts. There's a huge steamboat landing, and Gerald and I drove up to here and took the picture. And this is a part of that steamboat landing where George Bryant Gardner and the Romneys and the Lees and the Cottoms and the Danas and most of them landed that came by boat. And this was the kind of scene that they saw when they came. Let's go to the next one. Let's show you George Bryant Gardner. Okay, this is George Bryant Gardner. This is an older picture. So and he was a younger man when he came to Nauvoo. When he came to Nauvoo, he was a fantastic singer. And this girl, Elizabeth Ann Bird, had lost her first husband, Inglis Bliss, because of the persecutions we've now found out. And of course she divorced him, and then he died because of the persecution. And through her, and of course her father was Charles Bird, came Delbert L. Stapley, the form of the 12th. And so Delbert L. Stapley was a cousin, okay, of the Stratton side of all of them. Okay, she then, when they went to winter quarters, they still had a choir there. And because they were both so musically talented, they met each other because of the music interests. And there she became one of his plural wives. So he could take her across the plains and take care of her. Okay? So they went across the plains and they settled down in Dixie. Well, they settled in Salt Lake first, and then Elizabeth Ann Bird left, and she went to California and remarried in California. They got divorced. And this man, George Bryant Gardner, then went down to Dixie, and then he was called on another mission after he settled in Dixie for 17 years. He then went down for the 12 years down in Arizona, down around Woodruff. And that's where he helped Woodruff. And in his own story, as he tells about crossing the plains, he tells about how they went behind a train or a wagon train where there was cholera, and how they saw all the bones of all the people just scattered along the sides, and how they didn't dare drink the water because they knew that there was cholera. And he tells about how he made a prophecy. They had buffalo and hurricanes and all, bad weather, everything you can imagine come upon to keep them from doing it. Finally, he made a prophecy. He said, there won't be one more bad thing going to happen to us. And the next day, 500 Indians, armed to the hilt, surround the wagon train. And he turned to his wife and he said, I just made a prediction yesterday that everything was going to go just fine, and now we get 500 armed Indians. Well, they went out and made peace with the Indians, and the Indians traded them, and they were able to get food by trading with the Indians. So it turned out to be a good thing rather than a bad thing. So he put this in his life history as to how his prophecy came true. Okay? Let's go again.
Is she the one that did the cartoon that went blind?
No, we're not there yet. Okay, this is the Lee home. This is the Lee home up in northeast Nauvoo. Again, I'll show you the people who live there very briefly. And again, all these people are sealed to us. We're all sealed together as a family. These are the Lees. This is down here. This is Calvin Stratton over here. This is the Lees. This is Francis Lee and Jane Vale Johnson. This is Francis Lee and Jane Vale Johnson, and they were, let me tell you very quickly about them, they were also very close to, many of these people were very close to the prophet Joseph. It really isn't anything fancy to say that you were close to the prophet Joseph, because most of them knew him personally, because the church was still small enough. But when Joseph asked all the people to come to Nauvoo because of the persecutions, he was in a farm outlying, and they decided that they were going to take all of their harvest for that year and bring it in and give it to the saints that had been driven and persecuted, because they had gotten there earlier than most, and they had a good crop that had come through. And so he brought in his wagons full of food, and Joseph came out and brought him in, and he said, Joseph, here are the commodities that some of the people will need to see him through until they can plant their own crops. And so Joseph then blessed him. He says, okay, now do you want me to gather also into Nauvoo? I'm prepared to do that. And Joseph said, no, you stay outside for another season and do the same thing and then come in. And so he and Jane Vale Johnson had another season before they came into the home that you just saw. Okay? They had a son right here that was born at Nauvoo, and this is the Bunker's daughter that was born out west. And they were married. And we won't tell you about them, but we're going to tell you about this old Scots-Irish minister. This is his father.
Well, wait a minute. Calvin Stratton is my great.
No, this isn't Stratton's doll. This is Lee's.
Oh.
This is Lee's. Okay? This is Lee's. This is Marcia's side. Calvin's next. You can see it over here. Okay, this old Scots-Irish minister, he was baptized in the church, and then he spent the rest of his life preaching the gospel without Persian script. He spent the rest of his life preaching because he knew that the church was true. This is the father of this family. Okay, let's go again. Again. We haven't got time to show them all that. Okay, where am I? Oh! Okay, now we're down to the Romneys. Okay? And then we're going to get to the Strattons. I'm going around this thing. You're going to look on your charts. I'm going around this thing.
You skip mine and just get the Strattons. I've got too many relatives.
Well, they're just... We're all right. Okay. The Romneys, this is where the Romneys first moved and lived as tenants, somewhere up here. Again, check. And then they built a house. This is not the house they built. That's not an R, all right? But they built a home on this homestead right here, and that's what they did during that period. Again, check.
That H stands for homestead.
Yeah. And then they had then right out in here, in this field out in here somewhere, they had a place where they farmed. Okay, again. And these are the people that are there. This is the family that was closest to the Strattons. Of all this on the chart, this is the family that was closest to our Stratton line. The Romney and the Stratton, as you read their histories, they parallel each other. Let me tell you, for example, they came to Nauvoo at about the same time. They had property just a few blocks away from each other. He was the master mechanic in building the Nauvoo temple. And Oliver Stratton was one of the chief masons that helped make the block. Okay, but when they were called to St. George together, they went in the same troop caravan down to St. George to settle Dixie. And then when they got to St. George together, he was the superintendent of all construction of the St. George temple, and Oliver Stratton was the chief mason at the St. George temple. And so their lives just parallel all the way down. They worked side by side on two temples, these two men. Well, anyway.
And you two kids get together.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Kind of fancy, huh? Okay, well, these are the Romneys, and of course they, like most of the people we've been talking about, the men went on missions, and the women buried, bore children all the way through. And these are the children. This is the offspring of this. This is Miles Park Romney. And this is Catherine Jane Cottam, and they didn't get married until they came out west. Although he was born here on this land that you saw, and the Cottam piece that you saw, she was born on that cotton truck that you saw a minute ago. So they were both born at Nauvoo. Okay, so
and then they went to Mexico.
And they went down to Mexico for the police persecution. Is that it? Okay, put the next one in. Let me help you. Okay, now we only have about a third of the next one, so don't anybody get panic
Put it on
stricken.
pause, Jack.
Yeah, I don't know.
Very left button.
Right or left?
Right. Okay, now
All right. The button came up.
Okay. As you guys were saying a few minutes ago, most of these families intermarried. Marcia and I have found where many of our families intermarried as we've come down. And I'm sure that we'll find where many other families intermarried if we were, if we went back and really dug it out. So there's a lot of intermarrying, both at Nauvoo and afterwards, and down in Dixie and other parts in Salt Lake. Okay. This is the Nauvoo house where Benjamin Johnson, right? Where Benjamin Franklin Johnson. This is on Bob's side, on the Openshaw side. This is where he came and stayed for a while. And he also, like Charles Bird, was a bodyguard of the prophet Joseph Smith. And so they knew each other, undoubtedly. And it was in the basement of this house where Emma and Charles and the close family buried the bodies of the prophet Joseph and Hiram, at first to hide them from the mobs. The mobs, of course, came in to find them, and they lifted up the floorboard, but they couldn't find the bodies. And then they later reburied them over on the homestead. But this is the Nauvoo house where the Johnsons came. And Johnson that Johnson is kind of a famous name because he wrote a lot about the prophet Joseph in his lifetime. And I've got a book called They Knew the Prophet, where he has several quotes in there about his
owned by the
reorganized. Yes, and Gerald and Mason and I took a tour of this, and we were able to compare this with the LDS tours. And I won't make any comments about that. But the LDS certainly plays a dominant role. Okay, again with the check. Okay, now we get to our Stratton line, and I want to share with you, this is Sugar Creek as it comes down. According to the best map I could find, this is the Mississippi out there, as you can see. And as Sugar Creek comes down, they had somewhere along the Sugar Creek, we don't know whereabouts, but Oliver Stratton had a large farm. And he was farming this large piece of farm, and this shows the kind of farmland that he was farming on. Okay, the next one. He also had, I'm standing on Mulholland Street, which is the main street where we saw all the birds and all these other pieces of property. He also had a fourth of an acre, somewhere between this fence line and that White House. Right in this area here, he had a fourth of a piece of investment property, and this is where it was thought Oliver and Harriet were going to build their home before they got driven out of Nauvoo. Let me tell you about that. Again, I'll tell you about it. Okay, this is our Stratton line. This is Oliver Stratton and Harriet Ann Brown. Now, his father, Calvin Stratton, had lost his wife, and he helped his son farm on Sugar Creek. And Calvin Stratton had the privilege of being one of the first high priests ordained at the hand of the prophet Joseph Smith in our dispensation. And so Calvin Stratton has that distinction. He was faithful enough to be called to be one of the first high priests ever be ordained in our dispensation. His son then, they lived first of all at a place called Morley's Settlement, and they lived next to the Draper family. And the Draper family was close friends with the Browns and the Strattons. And so here is where, down in the Morley Settlement, is where Oliver and Harriet Ann Brown meet. And they fall in love and they get married. And they're going to build a home on that piece of property you just saw, the last piece. And they're driven out of Nauvoo. Okay? They had children. He was born at was he born in Nauvoo? He was born at Nauvoo. This is James Albert. This is Dad's grandfather. This is his great-grandfather, and Calvin is his great-great-grandfather.
He looks at there just like he did as I remember him as a teen kid.
James Albert Stratton. Let me tell you a couple of touching stories. Since this is our Stratton line, let me go just a couple more minutes on this one. Let me tell you, James Albert Stratton and Emily Amanda Gardner. This is George Bryant Gardner's daughter. Emily Amanda Gardner was born at Council Bluffs while they were crossing the plains. Okay, they came west as babies. They went down to Dixie, and there they met and fell in love. And all those places we saw in Dixie, all you Openshaws, that's where they danced, and that's where they went to church, and all the places that we saw. That's where because they built it. Okay. Now let me tell you about each of these families. He crossed the plains 7 times. He crossed the plains once as a child, and then he went back 3 trips to bring immigrants across. The poor saints that couldn't afford their own wagons, he went across to bring them. And Emily Amanda Gardner was the one that that was the primary president for many, many years in Dixie, in Virgin. And later on in life, she lost her eyesight. And so they took her to St. George, where the specialist said, we can't do anything for you anymore. And so they were going to send her home. Well, all the primary kids in Virgin had a special fast day where they all fasted and prayed for their primary president. And when she came back, she didn't have a cane or anything. She stepped down off the wagon, and she shared with the kids that the day when the kids had met to break their fast and pray for President Stratton, that was the very moment that she was standing by the west window and she saw the sun. So, and look at how close these stand. Well, these of course were buried together. We saw their graves up there together. They were so close that, you see, when she died, he was at Benini, Nevada, lumbering. It was too difficult to farm in Virgin, and so he was not able to get back before she passed away. But when she passed away, she had a little baby, and she had told Emily Amanda, her daughter-in-law, that was very close. She said, "You watch for my baby until I come for him." Well, Dad comes home, and while they're sitting there one evening, Emily Amanda says that she felt the presence of Harriet very strongly. And the next day she felt the presence again very strongly, and that afternoon the baby died. And so Harriet had indeed come to get her baby, to take him in the spirit world, to take care of him there. And so there's many, again, he was one of the chief masons of the Nauvoo Temple, and he was also, so he laid much of that block himself and supervised it. He also supervised and laid much of the block of the St. George Temple. That's why
Calvin Stratton?
this is Oliver.
Oliver. That's Oliver.
Calvin's his father. And Calvin's father, when Calvin was 18 years old, his father, Sariah, died. And your Gershom Bulkley was made his guardian. Of Grandpa's great-grandfather was your relative, was the guardian of Grandpa's great-grandfather. You, Mother.
Yeah.
So your relative Gershom Bulkley was made the guardian of Grandpa's. Okay, this guy is Oliver. His father is Calvin. When Calvin was 18 years old, his father died, and Calvin was made. Your relative was the guardian of Calvin when he was 18 years old.
That helped to raise him.
In Connecticut, Windsor, Connecticut.
So one of your great-grandfathers helped raise one of Dad's great-grandfathers.
And now you got together. Isn't that, see how our lives is intertwined?
And you know, it's just all one big family. Okay, I could go on and on. We better go. Let's go. Okay, now we get back to Gerald's side. This is the Phelps, and the Phelps, what was his name?
Morris Charles.
Morris Charles Phelps. Morris Charles Phelps had his plot. This is right in the middle of the state park now. Apparently, the state of Nauvoo also likes the Phelps property because they got it all. So right here, right behind the Sunstone, which is right in the middle of the state park, these vines you see here, that's all a vineyard. And this is the quarter acre that Charles Phelps had as a garden plot. Okay, go again. Now if you go one block up this way from that last one block up, you get this kind of a hillside right here next to the heads. And right here on this hillside, this quarter acre is where he had his home site. And this was Charles Phelps' home site. And
Charles Phelps' daughter married the son of Charles Root Dana, so they had, the families had known one another in Nauvoo.
Okay. Now Charles Phelps was probably one of the earliest that we have, besides one of the Strattons and the Birds. The Phelps were probably the earliest of all the converts. The Phelps joined the church in 1831. Ebenezer Brown says he was baptized in 1829, but we don't know. We don't think that's legal. Okay, church wasn't there until 1830. But he was probably one of the first members of the church in our dispensation, being baptized less than a year after the church was organized, and he was baptized in 1831. And he went through all the tribulations, apparently, and ended up here at Nauvoo with this place right here, and then he crossed the plains, and he's the one that settled up in Idaho, is that right?
Yeah, and they also came down to Mesa.
And his wife was just like our bird. You know, the bird lady that bore children, because I have down here that she bore children they had 3 children at Nauvoo and 1 at Winter Quarters, and then they came across and they had more children to the west.
Yeah.
So they also bore children during all those persecutions, and this is where the Phelps side, which may be tied to the Carol Ann's Phelps
Yeah,
side.
Dad's Phelps. But
Okay.
it is legal because several people were baptized before the church was organized. The day they organized the church, they rebaptized them.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
right?
that's in church history. I just read it a few weeks ago.
Okay, well, I'll show you the one that was baptized before the church was organized in just a minute. Let's go again. Okay, now we get, this is the Morley settlement, or as best as we can guess where it was. This is where the Strattons and the Browns, this is both on Dad's side here, the Strattons and the Browns. Okay, go again. And Ebenezer Brown, which is on Dad's side, this is, that was the Knowlton settlement. This is the Morley settlement where he fought against the mob. And as a result of his fighting against the mob, he lost the battle. And the mob took his knife and his gun and beat him up, and at least so far as we're aware, they beat him up. And then he later wrote an affidavit against him with the local sheriff, stating that he'd been persecuted because of his religion at this place here called Morley Settlement. Okay, now I'll show you a picture of this guy. This is Ebenezer Brown. Now, Ebenezer Brown was the man who was baptized in 1829. Before the church was organized. This is on Dad's side. And he went through every period of the church. He went through all of the Ohio period, the Kirtland period. He helped, with his family, helped take their china and break it up and mince it up so that they could put it in the plaster that went on the outside of the Kirtland temple to make it shine when the sun hit it. And he, of course, after they got to the Far West War, he was ready to fight, the 5,000 against the 500 to preserve his family at the Far West War. Many of these were the Far West War. I've only mentioned 2 or 3, but there was about 6 or 8 of them that were. And then when it came time for Nauvoo, guess who was a sergeant in the Mormon Battalion? Went all the way to the Mormon Battalion, came back. Then he goes down and he helped settle Draper, Utah. When Johnson's he then is called to go over to Nevada, to where we live, and he was called to settle in the Nevada mission. And he went over by Reno and settled over there, the next valley over from Reno. And then when Johnson's army came, he went over into California and spent all that he had. He sold his property, spent all that he had to get guns and ammunition, because that's what Brigham asked for, to bring it back to Salt Lake to fight Johnson's army with. When Johnson's army didn't happen, of course he was a sergeant there, so he was one of the guys out in the mountains keeping Johnson's army from coming in. And then when Johnson's army finally came in peacefully, and went through a mock of a march through Salt Lake, he then went back down to Draper, Utah, and that's where he died. And so this is Ebenezer Brown. One of he was. And we have much of his history, at least written by the people. Okay, this is a map showing where some of these places were. This is Quincy. Well, I'll show you that in just a minute. Now, for him, let me just show you where it was. This is the Morley settlement where he was mobbed, and this is the Knowlton settlement where he and the Strattons lived. And it was his daughter that married Oliver Stratton. So this is Dad's first great grandfather.
That's just down from Keokuk, Iowa.
Yeah, this is Nauvoo right here. This is Nauvoo right here.
Remember us crossing the river there at Keokuk, Mother?
And he's the one that wanted the reunion there. But he wanted the reunion. Yeah, I just checked and it's open in here.
Okay, let's go. I'm almost through. I'm only
Most of the
long-winded.
kids are asleep, so you can take your time.
Oh, all right. Okay. Focus that. This is my side right here. Dad and Mom can claim this if they want, but this is my side. This is where I went on my mission. I wrote their life story. Years and years of research, and I wrote this life history. This is the Isoms. That's why I named my bird Isom at school. This is the Isoms. This is the original Isom family that joined the church in England. All right, Owen Isom and Elizabeth Howard, and I was on my mission where they lived in Birmingham and in Alva Church, and he was a stake president, what we would now call a stake president, in Birmingham, and he helped. The brethren wouldn't let him leave, and so he spent about 11 or 12 years in England as the stake president, helping to convert all the thousands of saints and helping them to immigrate. And he helped get the Millennial Star printed in England. He helped with the first British publication of the Book of Mormon. He was a main figure in English church history, was Owen Isom. He would go to church and they would throw rocks and rotten eggs and tomatoes at him because he was a member of the Mormon church, because he was the leader. And in I've not read it, but they say that there's some old newspaper clippings where they used him as the figurehead for the Mormon church. And so whenever they came out against the Mormon church, they used this family to blaspheme and to go against. And so this is our English immigrants that for all the general authorities all came and stayed in their homes as they came to England, and finally he was allowed to come to America. And first of all, his son and daughter had come to America about a year before them because they had the resources to do that. I'll talk about them in just a minute. But Owen and Elizabeth, they came to New York with the faith in that they would be able to get enough money. A year later, they had saved enough money, and they were going on this railroad, the Burlington Quincy Railroad, to see. Now, here's the Knowlton and Morley settlement that we talked about with Ebenezer. There was, while they were right around in this area, when it happened, when that hoghead on the railroad saw that the flat car that had their belongings strapped to it was on fire, and instead of stopping, he unhooked the passenger cars and he drove at a faster rate of speed so that it would burn up all of their belongings, because he, quote, was going to drive those Mormons to hell, quote. And then when he came back, they were all on that train and they were all in every which direction. Instead of slowing down, he came up and he hit the train with the engine real hard and jolted them to try to hurt people. And so this is that was one of the things. And then of course they came and then they walked across the plains. They crossed the plains as pioneers, English pioneers, and they of course went down and settled in Dixie, as most of the people on this chart did. This is the family that we saw up there, Carol, up at Mountain Dell. They established Mountain Dell. Okay, this is their son and their daughter-in-law. Because they were in England for so long, they had some of their kids go on missions in England. And so he was sent to Liverpool, England. This is William Stratt, on a mission. And while he was in Liverpool, England, he met this math teacher named Catherine Wolfe. And they fell in love, but he wasn't able to convert her. But he got her a Book of Mormon. And so then they continued to correspond by mail. And when he decided to go to Zion, to gather in the tops of the mountains, he wrote to her and said, "I want you to go with me." And she says, "I'm going." And so he went and got her. They were married, and they set sail on the same day. And it was her parents that disowned her. And this is the story that Grandma Stratton told me when I was a young man about her, and about how her parents hated the Mormons so badly that they said, and she was about 18 I think at the time, if you marry that Mormon, then don't, then we'll totally disown you, and don't ever let. And she said, "What can I write you?" And her dad said, "Don't ever let a United States postage stamp darken this doorstep." And so she went to cross the plains on the same railroad. She crossed the plains too, and then by wagon. And then she used to write letters back to a friend of hers, who then went and read it to her mother, so that there was some contact. But remember, her parents had softened just at the last minute, and while they were boarding the boat, the parents had the 3 big trunks that she started to pack, and they said, "You leave the house with only the shirt on your back if you're going to be a Mormon." So she left. She married him, and they got on board. And then one of the stewards came up and said, "Somebody just loaded 3 trunks on the boat for you." And they went down, and they were full of family heirlooms and whatever money that the parents could scrape together to help their daughter. But also, they still did not want to hear from her. They still disowned her. And it was with that money that they made it across the plains, and that's why they had to wait a year, because there wasn't enough for all of them. And so they went straight across, and then they came a year later. This is the one you kids remember, where this is the man that he was wearing the hat for a long time, and his wife and his mother and father didn't like it, and so they bought him a new hat. And he was so stubborn, he says, "No, I'll wear this hat." So he went in to eat, and he left his hat by the wash basin, and some of the kids took his hat, poked it down in the old slop bucket, in the slop barrel, and about a week and a half later, he was pouring some mash in, to make up the slop for the pigs, and he found his old hat, and he shook it off, and he wore it for about 2 weeks after that, just to show that he could wear whatever hat he wanted. That's why they call the Isoms the stubborn side. They were stubborn, but they had to be. To be the kind of leaders that they were in England, they had to be a little bit stubborn. They had to be a little bit mature. Let's go again.
We've got a stubborn bird at school that Cliff calls Isom.
Okay, this is the last of them. We get on Marcia's side now. And let me share with you, this is Marcia's Methodist minister that joined the church. I'm not as well acquainted with some of these as I might. This is her strong side. And I tease her about her strong side. This is the strong side. And he was a Methodist minister that joined the church. And again, like the Scots-Irish minister, he spent almost all of his life proselyting for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He lost his wife at Nauvoo. Okay? Their daughter married Tinney. This is the Tinney side. You hear about Tinney on us all the time. This is the Tinney side. And This is whenever I think about them, I think about the birds, about the real birds. This family, now these two kids were born later. Okay, so we're talking about this family right here. Nathan Cram and Olive Strong. Nathan Cram, Tinney, and Olive Strong. When they were kicked out of Nauvoo, they were in that group of about 100 or 150 saints that were fed by the quail. The quail just came into camp, and then they just ate whatever they wanted, and then they left, and they came in, they ate whatever they wanted, and left. And also, because they, like many of these families, were on that first wagon train to go in the valley, they were also in on that seagull incident. They had all their crops in when the crickets came, and then they had to kill the crickets. They prayed, and then the seagulls came and ate them up. Well, this is one of the families on this chart that was also involved with that. Okay, Chuck, I wanted to...
Her Strong, that Strong is related to Bob Strong. They have the same common ancestor back about 6 generations.
Way back, the first Strong that ever came to America.
So those two are related on that line.
And Carol Ann's the one that found my Strong genealogy. We had nothing, and Carol Ann's the one that found it, that I'm taking to my reunion, and my family's so excited and Mark's taking me.
I wanted to share with you, I've just got 2 or 3 more slides to share with you. Some special things that happened to our family. This is the end of Teardrop Lane. In Nauvoo, the lane that goes right in front of the 70s Hall, this is the lane where there's a big monument over here. This is where the Mormon